Oh, and Gerrard slipped, and Denver Barr's in here. Out comes Mignolet, but Barr. It's a terrific moment for Chelsea, but an awful one for the Liverpool skipper.
In April 2014, Liverpool were on the brink of securing their first domestic league title in over 2 decades. They sat 3 points above Manchester City with just 3 games remaining. What happened next, however, has gone down in Premier League history. Liverpool's captain Steven Gerrard, normally one of the most reliable and formidable players in English football, slipped at the crucial moment, causing a crushing blow to their title hopes. Their fate was then sealed in the following match as a result of a shocking collapse against Crystal Palace, in which Liverpool squandered a 3-goal lead. Liverpool's heartbreak is far from unique. Arsenal, for example, in the 22-23 season, showed a similar capitulation. Chasing their first Premier League title in nearly 20 years, they were 5 points clear of Manchester City with 9 games to play. Yet in a dramatic turn, they won only 3 of their final 9 matches, averaging just 1.33 points per game, an astonishing drop from the 2.48 points per game they had averaged up to that point in the season. So why do teams that demonstrate dominance and consistency for long stretches suddenly unravel in the most crucial moments? Well, these examples highlight that sport is far more than just athletic ability and skill. In the closing stages of a season, teams are battling not only their opponents on the pitch, but also the psychological forces of pressure, expectation and self-doubt. And ultimately, the mental side of the game may often prove decisive when it comes to winning things. As the season draws to a close, players can experience extreme pressure to get their teams over the line. Each win moves them one step closer to the title, while knowing that just one mistake can be catastrophic. In these moments, every pass, shot, or defensive action can feel unusually significant. This pressure is also reinforced by the thousands of supporters in the stadium who nervously anticipate to see their teams bring long-awaited success. A crowd that would normally cheer confidently can instead begin show signs of tension. Groans at a misplaced pass, frustration when the possession is lost, or anxious murmurs when the team fails to take an early lead. This heightened sense of pressure can generate considerable anxiety and stress in players. Psychological research has repeatedly shown that the kind of anxiety felt in these high-pressure moments can have an impact on performance. While moderate levels of pressure can positively impact performance, when this pressure becomes too high, it can have a negative impact. This extreme pressure can make even highly skilled athletes begin to perform below the level they would normally be capable of, a phenomenon called choking under pressure. Perhaps one of the most famous examples of choking under pressure comes from golfer Jordan Spieth. In 2016, Spieth was on track to become only the 4th player in history to win back-to-back Masters tournaments, and at just age 22, he would have been the youngest ever player to have achieved this feat. Heading into the final 9 holes, he led the field by 5 shots. What followed is considered one of the most dramatic collapses in golfing history. Spieth began to show signs of cracking under pressure when he bogeyed at both the 10th and 11th hole. Going into the 12th hole, Spieth knew that his once commanding lead had been reduced to just 1 shot, as his opponent had just picked up 2 consecutive birdies. Experiencing extreme pressure, Spieth then hit his next 2 shots into the water, and his third landed in the bunker. He finished the 12th hole scoring a quadruple bogey, and in the space of just 30 minutes, his 5-shot lead had been decimated, leaving him instead 3 shots behind. Part of the reason this phenomenon occurs may be that rising anxiety can alter the way people direct their attention. Psychologists have shown that when individuals feel under pressure, their attentional focus can shift in ways that interferes with performance. In high-pressure moments, athletes can become acutely aware of the need to execute actions perfectly. As a result, they begin to consciously monitor and focus on their precise movements, and this can cause a problem. Normally, these skills, like how they strike a ball, swing the golf club, or throw a basketball, are done automatically, because they've practiced them thousands of times. And it's this ability to do these actions fluently, without conscious deliberation, that makes them so skilled. However, in high-pressure moments, focusing on these actions makes them less smooth and coordinated, something psychologists have termed paralysis by analysis. In more simple terms, this is what we might describe as overthinking it. Perhaps one of the most famous examples of an athlete showing signs of overthinking it due to extreme pressure is that of cricketer Scott Boswell in the final of the Cheltenham and Gloucester Trophy. Boswell had previously delivered a man of the match performance in the semi-final to earn his team a place in the final held at Lord's Cricket Ground, one of the most prestigious venues in sport. For Boswell, this match was meant to be the pinnacle of his cricketing career. However, it quickly became a day he would rather forget. Under the scrutiny and pressure of such a high-profile final, Boswell delivered what has since become widely remembered as one of the worst overs in cricket. Struggling to control the ball, he bowled a staggering 8 wides, leaving fans in the stadium watching on in bewilderment. Reflecting back on the experience, Boswell said, "I became so anxious, I froze. How can I not run up and bowl something that I've done for so many years without even thinking about it? I was not trusting my skills, my subconscious mind, all that stuff I'd done before." Boswell did not bowl again for the remainder of the match. Just 2 weeks later, his professional career effectively came to an end when Leicestershire Cricket Club released him from the team. Another reason that performance can suffer under pressure is that anxiety can also distract athletes from fully focusing on the task in front of them. When people feel anxious, their attention is often pulled away from the activity they're trying to perform. This might be, for example, by focusing on the thoughts of the pressure itself, such as worrying about making a mistake, or the criticism they might face if they don't win. However, it can also be that their attention becomes drawn to external cues, such as how much time is left on the clock, the noise from the crowd, or thinking about what might be occurring in the rival's match. While these factors may feel important in the moment, they do little to help the player execute the immediate demands of the game. The problem is that attention and mental processing capacity is limited, so when our attention is taken up by worries or other distractions, we have less resources left available to dedicate to the things that we should be doing on the pitch, such as controlling the ball, tracking runs, or deciding which pass to make. Okay, so pressure can sometimes generate extreme anxiety, and this can alter attention and disrupt natural rhythm, and these have a diminishing effect on performance. However, the experience of anxiety can further compound this problem, because worrying about making a mistake can sometimes act as a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Psychologists refer to this as an ironic effect, or ironic error. This occurs because generally when we think about unwanted outcomes, like missing a penalty or dropping the ball, we try to suppress and avoid these unwanted thoughts. However, under high pressure, the ability to successfully banish these thoughts out of our mind becomes more difficult. As a result, the mistake remains active in our mind and can ironically increase the chance of it happening. This process is sometimes known as the white bear phenomenon, in part due to the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky and the original experiments that used the concept of asking participants to actively not think about a white bear. In relation to sporting behaviour, a review of 24 studies involving sports players has found that prompting athletes to first think about making a particular error increases the likelihood that they will then go on to make that error, particularly when they are under pressure. An example of these ironic effects may be seen in the 1996 Euro semi-final between England and Germany. With the match ending in 1-1, the game went to penalties, and both teams had scored the first 5 of their penalties when England defender Gareth Southgate went forward to take his fateful penalty. Reflecting back on what was going through his mind at the time, Southgate said, "I knew where I wanted to put the kick, but around the point where the score reached 4-4 and nobody had failed, my mind switched to the negative. What if I miss?" That simple thought, which with better mental awareness could have been dismissed, was now nudging its way into my subconscious. And with hindsight, I know that was the tipping point of my failure. The problem for athletes is that once these effects take hold, they can begin to create a snowball effect. Anxiety leads to a mistake, which in turn further increases anxiety, making further mistakes more likely. While these effects may occur at an individual player level, these issues can quickly take hold in a full team, leading to a marked sudden collapse in team performance. This is what a team of psychologists from Australia identified as unforced error accumulation, and this may play a critical role in team collapses. Individual mistakes can lead to insecurity spreading throughout the whole team, causing further mistakes to occur. Once these mistakes pile up, players then find it difficult to stem the flow of the tide. They begin to feel trapped in a downward spiral, hopeless and unsure of how to regain control of the game. This sense of helplessness can further lead to players shying away from taking individual responsibility, which further accelerates this collapse. As one athlete described it, everyone thought, "Oh God, I don't want to take the ball anymore. You take it. You do the mistake." A prominent example of this kind of collapse is Barcelona's remarkable comeback against Paris Saint-Germain in the 2017 Champions League. PSG entered the match with a commanding 4-0 advantage from the first leg, a lead that would normally be considered impossible to overturn. However, what unfolded was a litany of unforced errors, leading to an entire team collapse. Barcelona scored their first goal in the 3rd minute, immediately increasing the pressure on the PSG players. As the game progressed, mistakes began to appear. Just before half-time, PSG defender Layvin Kurzawa inadvertently turned the ball into his own net. Shortly into the second half, a PSG defender slipped and inadvertently brought down Neymar in the penalty area, which Barcelona duly converted to reduce the deficit to just 1 goal. By this stage, the PSG players must have begun to fear that the unthinkable was happening, and by the end of the game they had completely capitulated, conceding 3 goals in the final 7 minutes and losing the match 6-1. One of the challenges with choking is that once it happens, it can make it easier to happen again. Some teams can experience such repeated setbacks that it begins to feel as though they are cursed, as if there is some sort of supernatural force holding them back from success. A prominent example of this believed curse comes from Major League Baseball and the Chicago Cubs, who did not win the league or the World Series for 71 years, despite coming close on multiple occasions. Their long period of failure became famously associated with the curse of the Billy Goat. The story goes that in 1945, William Sayanis, owner of the Billy Goat Tavern, was ejected from the stadium along with his goat and allegedly declared, "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more." Over the following decades, numerous attempts were made to break the curse, including inviting Sayanis' nephew with other goats to the stadium. The curse was finally lifted in 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series. From a psychological perspective, these effects may be better understood through the lens of stereotype threat rather than the supernatural. Over time, certain teams can just become associated with certain ideas. For example, the England national football team is often linked with losing penalty shootouts, as we saw with the Gareth Southgate example. Psychological research shows that when individuals or groups begin to identify with the stereotypes about themselves, they're more likely to behave in ways that confirm these stereotypes, creating a somewhat self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, clearly some athletes are more susceptible to pressure than others. Scott Boswell, for example, described himself as a nervous cricketer. Yet certain situations naturally evoke more pressure than others, such as attempting historic feats like Jordan Spieth, or meeting the high expectations of delivering a major trophy to a football club for the first time in decades, as with Arsenal and Liverpool. In football, it's often said, "You won't win anything with kids," or the importance of having won things before to give teams the edge in the final stages of the season. While this may sound cliché, there is probably some truth to it. Overcoming the psychological hurdle of winning a first title can be extremely difficult, especially when fans' expectations are high after long periods without success. Take for example Manchester City. Their first ever Premier League success nearly resulted in a psychological collapse of their own, finding themselves 2-1 down at home to Queen's Park Rangers on the final day of the season. Although their season was eventually salvaged by 2 injury-time goals, their performance that day was a far cry from the more composed nature they have displayed in subsequent Premier League campaigns. And this brings us to the current season, where Arsenal are mounting a fresh challenge to break this 22-year-long title drought. Entering the final 7 games, they sit 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League. But questions are already being raised about whether the team is beginning to feel the pressure after a number of setbacks and stuttering performances. Of course, it remains to be seen whether Arsenal will ultimately be successful. But if psychology tells us anything, it is that if they do, it may at times look a lot less than perfect, full of errors, nail-biting moments, and maybe an overall sense that they stumbled over the line, rather than winning it in style that people often expect of those worthy of the name champions. However, this is the reality of pressure. Not all title challenges are created equal, and some carry pressures far greater than what other teams may experience. If Arsenal finally do succeed, it may be more appropriate to celebrate their ability to overcome these immense psychological challenges, hurdles that have caused many teams before them to falter.